I launched Condé Nast Traveler. I was part of that team. And then ultimately was made president of the New Yorker when I was in my late 30s. And just kept going from there, and ultimately ended up at Vogue, which I was there for about 10 years with Anna.
You know, when I think back to my time working in fashion and the tragedies that happened, the people who had so much success on one side, but had such an inner struggle.
I think there came a time where I didn't know the difference between my story and my truth. I've done this ayahuasca, and it is 30 years of therapy in like 3 days.
So for you, with this incredible career, I mean, when you look back at who you were back then to who you are now, how do you think you've improved? And am I looking here?
I was talking about Jack when he was just a 10-year-old, and you said, "Oh, I have to introduce you to Nile Rodgers."
Yeah.
And we all ended up becoming friends.
I was wearing the conviction shoes.
We were in the conviction shoe.
I'm going to tell.
It was late after everything. I was all juiced up, and you told me you don't drink.
I don't know if we're even going to talk about anything on that list. You know, I feel like we're just going to talk.
You go.
My name is Anouska de Georgiou. My guest today is none other than Tom Florio, one of the most powerful men in fashion. With over 25 years at Condé Nast, he has incredible accolades, even more incredible stories. And today, he reveals his story about his journey with ayahuasca. Please check it out. Welcome, Tom.
How are you, Anouska?
Oh, I'm so happy you're here. I was thinking earlier about when we first met and what a magical moment that was, but also how very long ago it was. And I think it's coming up on like 22, 23 years, maybe.
I don't know if it's quite that much, but I think it's got to be at least 10 or 11. You know, you can't, I would have met you when you were 15. Come on.
That's ever the charmer, as you always have been. But when I was in my late 20s, I think, and in New York, and I was being stretched out at a gym. I should have said that differently.
They charge so much at these gyms.
I had a trainer who was kindly stretching me, and you came around the corner, and I remember seeing your cheeky little face coming around the corner, and I think you just saw the top of my leg somewhere up near my head. And my trainer was also your trainer.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you made it a point to come and say hello because as I came to realize about you, you made it your business to know all the interesting things that were going on anywhere that you were. And usually you were the most interesting thing going on.
Well, I don't know about that, but
yeah.
We both shared the same trainer, and I was training at the time for a triathlon. Actually, I think I was training for the Vogue the gondola race around. I was around, only 2 Americans. It's called the Vogue and they race gondolas around Venice.
I can't even say the Vogue.
And there are 1,800 gondolas that go around, and they all meet at St. Mark's Square. And he was training me with all these weird exercises to like, anyway, and there was your leg. And I know I had paid this man just tons of money over the last years for training me. And, you know, we have talked about it. He just kind of walks away when I'm done with my training. And there I see him, he's stretching and paying all this attention. And I knew there was something very special under that sneaker. And there you were when I came around the bend.
And all these years later.
And then we started to talk about my son, Jack. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Nile Rodgers came onto the scene, and I connected you and your son with Nile, and who loved your son and loved you too. Yeah.
And all these years later, Jack's in LA working with a producer. So there we are.
And
we've got it all.
We do. We got it all. And what an amazing journey that you've been on. To see you over the past, whether you like to admit it or not, 20 some years, and to have had the privilege of watching you as this fiery, passionate, but sensitive and just incredibly, you just had this incredible grace. I always think of you, and I have this thing that comes to my mind when I think of you, as you are to the fashion business as Fred Astaire is to dancing.
Wow, that's an incredible compliment. Thank you. I don't know if that's true, but it's a lovely image.
Well, the way that I've always experienced you is that you have seen and experienced the finest things in life, but you have an equal appreciation for the simplest things in life. And I think that's a talent, it's a skill, on a personal level and on the level of business too. I mean, you are such an accomplished business person, and you've managed to transfer that skill into different incarnations of your career. So can you tell me a little bit about what those incarnations, how they came about? Or how did it start? Can I ask you how it started?
I'm laughing because it's like it came about because I didn't have any money. And I needed to get a job. And I mean, I grew up in a very middle class household on Long Island, New York. I was like a lifeguard, and everybody spoke in vowels. It was like, hey, oh, ooh. And I was very much wanting to leave there and go to New York City, and went to NYU and just started to see this certain lifestyle, and ended up getting a job at New York Magazine back when Clay Felka actually had just sold it to Rupert Murdoch. And that was my kind of first, real job in there. My older brother, who's 7 years older than I, was working at Esquire, and then went over to Condé Nast to be the publisher of GQ when he was about 25. So I was maybe, I was just graduating from college. So that was really the first kind of look in, and ended up ultimately getting a job at Vanity Fair with Tina Brown after they had launched it. It was a terrible launch, and I think I was 26 years old, and met Tina Brown, and just, it was like going to the theater and falling in love with somebody on stage. Like, she was 30, irreverent, had come from the Tatler, brilliant, and at the time, people didn't really understand the idea of a Vanity Fair. They knew Town and Country was for like wealthy elitists, and then there was, Vogue, which was the fashion Bible, but this space that Vanity Fair took back in like 1983, which is I think what we're talking about, was this really new space for baby boomers, which presented what was new and gave you a new take on what was known. For like this whole generation of people who like bought Ralph Lauren so they could look like they were old money, but they were Spanish, and Italian and Jewish, So what Vanity Fair was back then, and it was super exciting, was it just kind of fed this generation culture. So, and Annie Leibovitz was a part of that. We just did some really cool work. And from there, I had the opportunity to continue to work through Condé, going to Condé Nast Traveler with Harry Evans, who was married to Tina Brown, but was the editor-in-chief of the Times of London, and was actually kicked out from Murdoch and Margaret Thatcher because he was writing all these stories about dumping toxic chemicals in the Thames. So I launched Condé Nast Traveler. I was part of that team, and then ultimately was made president of the New Yorker when I was in my late 30s, and just kept going from there, and ultimately ended up at Vogue, which I was there for about 10 years with Anna.
I mean, such an incredible accolade, such an incredible experience. I'm sure you hold so many secrets and have seen so much of the maybe the darker sides of the fashion business. What is your take on how the fashion business has changed since you came into it as a really young man through now, and through all those different stages of how fashion has changed in terms of like mental health and the way that mental health is addressed?
Well, media is sociological. Media companies kind of follow values, follow trends, and fashion is anthropological. So I guess my first response is fashion has evolved with the way values have changed, and people's roles have changed. The approach that I remember, early on, even before Vogue, was that there was an opportunity for young creative people to come into New York City. I remember when they would still be wheeling those racks of clothes across 7th Avenue. And I found it to be just crazy exciting. But, I remember meeting Calvin Klein really young, like when I was in my 20s. And, they were you were able to have a great idea, do it well, break rules, and achieve great things. The Battle of Versailles is like such a, epic moment where you had all of a sudden these American designers and these French designers, battling it off. I don't know with fast fashion and with big business owning, there are two main companies that own the luxury business today. I don't know how, and with fast fashion, and with, the whole issues of gender and how, the approach to it is different. It's faster. There are fewer players controlling it. It seems to be more global than it's ever been. I think in some ways it's probably more difficult. In others, you don't need a media property. You don't need a media property to say you're okay. You can go on a podcast of the D'Amelio Girls or somebody, and there are 25 million people watching it, and you could take off. My experience working with Vogue and with Anna is there was an intellectual rigor that went with it. It wasn't follow the runway and write up your big advertiser, or things were divine. It was like art. It was like there was a reference point for everything. That scene, and probably the only scene in The Devil Wears Prada that reflected my experience at Vogue, was the scene where Anna talks about the color blue and how it went back. There's just such an understanding of, a poire waist or a leg of mutton sleeve, like where that rigor was always there when I was there. I don't know how that rigor is there today.
Right.
But there's certainly, it's certainly harder, I would think, to get in. The whole retail distribution, they changed. Neiman Marcus was just acquired and then basically closed down. There are less outlets. There's no Charivari anymore. There's no Barney's anymore.
Right. It's all gone.
These are all gone. So,
I feel like there was, referencing back to like The Devil Wears Prada and that reference you made, there was such a rite of passage back in the day. And I'm talking about, in the 80s and 90s and even prior to that, where whether you were a photographer or a model or a designer or an editor, you had to jump through certain hoops to get to that point. And then suddenly something shifted, and anyone with an iPhone was a photographer, and anyone with an Instagram account was a model. And I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Well, look, I think the term, the democratization of fashion, has been around for a long time. And I guess I feel fine about that because it's available to more people. I think not unlike the news or media in general, I think that one of the things that comes along with everybody creating their own content is not everybody has the understanding or the background or the credibility or the reference point to be creating that content. It's not fashion, but that the New Yorker, people talk about the writing at the New Yorker, which made the New Yorker brilliant, was not the writing as much as the editing. By the time, Canaletti's piece would come in and it would be great, but then by the time it went through David Remnick at the time, who was an editor, and Dorothy Wickerton, who was from Newsweek, or Bill Buford, who came from Granta, and it was not only making sure, grammatically things were correct, or everything was fact checked to the nth degree, but the quality and the richness of the writing was there. Malcolm Gladwell worked at the New Yorker when I was there. I think, entertainment's the same way. So how do I feel about it? I get concerned sometimes, not just about fashion, but I get concerned sometimes at the lack of credible information and how minority voices can appear as a majority point of view of how easy it's become to manipulate people. The company I had that I just sold, which paper was a part of it, Entech Media Group, I mean, basically, I took the people who were part of the audience with Ari Emanuel started with years ago, which was one of the early social media companies. And, we could hyper target anybody and see what they click on and send out messages. I think we're seeing the results of really extreme and challenging times of people using false information and being able to identify communities that will respond to that false information and creating fear and division. So I think there are two sides to it,
I think, it's interesting you bring up that point of sort of targeting a certain group and feeding them the information that you want them to receive. I think many consumers don't understand how the algorithm works that feeds them information and feeds them the information that they will be most likely to receive well, and then makes them malleable, right? But even from the perspective of someone who understands that, it still works on us. And that's the way advertising works, is even if you understand that you're being manipulated, you can still be manipulated. Right?
Yeah, and I think the tools today are better than the technology today is, and it's only going to get better with AI, is able to really hone in on that in a way that we weren't able to or wasn't available, years ago. So when we talk about this as it relates to the creative arts, look, I think, with some people, it will make it more available to certain people. I guess the question will be, will there be a market? Will people pay for quality? I mean, I had the just incredible opportunity to work with some of the, the best photographers. Dick Avedon was the photographer for the New Yorker when I was there, and Mario Testino at Vogue, and and working with somebody like Grace Coddington, who made print cinematic. I mean, this work was just brilliant creative work. It was really expensive, though. Nobody's spending $500,000 on a photo shoot anymore.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And so...
And there's I feel like there's sadness in that for me.
Well, there's certainly sadness in it for me.
Right. Well, yeah, on many levels.
but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if if it's necessary. You know what I'm saying? It's like
But isn't that one of the things that was magical about fashion back in the 90s, is that you didn't just do something because it was necessary. You did it for the art of it. And it's like when you look at buildings now, do you need to spend 3 years, painting a ceiling or creating a piece of art out of building work? No, you don't need to, but you do it for the art. And so something is lost in the art when less effort is required.
I understand that point of view. I just don't know if it matters to a pretty large group of the population anymore, and what that will look like.
Sure, yeah. So if it doesn't matter, I wonder what does matter.
Well, that will probably that will be kind of that will be kind of an individual. It will matter to the individual. We're certainly not going to have as much of a kind of an overarching consensus about what matters anymore. I think, and I, again, and I think we're in. I was going to say we're moving, but we're like deeply in a highly manipulative culture war right now. That's made available through all these tools.
Yeah. I remember, when I was modeling as a teenager and into my early 20s, and looking back on that time, I realized how vulnerable I was in a system where there were many, many very young girls and boys, young men and women, but predominantly very young women, in a system that was controlled and run predominantly by much older men. Do you think it's safer now than it used to be for maybe young models coming into that world?
I don't. I say yes. I do think it's safer because there's a lot that's been done, and there are new rules. And Diane von Furstenberg, really got behind it when she was the head of the Council of Fashion Designers, and there were other organizations that no alcohol at shows and etc. I think the Me Too movement, certainly has had something to do with that. I think the agencies in general have been cleaned up quite a bit. I also think, though, to some degree, if you're in fashion, music, or entertainment, sex is involved. It's not. It doesn't have to be predatory. It could be consensual, and probably more likely is today. But yeah, I do think it's probably. It is better. I think that there was a lot of power pressure, particularly with we won't name names, but certain very prominent photographers. You would know these stories better than I. We really rarely bumped up, at least but in generally, we rarely bumped up against that at Vogue when I was there, because our standards were so high. And, Anna certainly is such a pro-female power executive that I think it would be, and again, I don't know, I think it would be kind of an issue if something if that were a regular thing. But I was never personally aware of it, and we were certainly, I remember Carly Kloss, was the same age as my daughter. So when she was a lacrosse player when she was in school, and I remember her sitting with a whole group of us in Paris when she was maybe 16 or 17, and I never got the sense for a minute that she wasn't with people who were looking at her like a young girl, and to treat her respectfully. But she could probably tell you the stories. But I know my experiences with that were.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some schools of thought that acknowledge that because it was just a different time, that things that now would be quite shocking would just seen more innocently, or do you know what I mean? Like there are things, there are certain nuances that were just kind of accepted.
Yeah.
And now, if there's even the slightest kind of insinuation of something that could be sexualizing somebody in some inappropriate way, it's very much blown up.
Well, look, I think the pendulum has to swing pretty far, you know, back in one direction before. I think that many of these businesses were male-dominated businesses. There were young women involved. There was, even if it wasn't like physically forcing, there were huge power plays at stake. And then there's also, people in those positions that, none of the above is going on, but they're on the other side of a desk, which, I was on the other side of a desk where people behaved a certain way to me because of what I did for a living. And, you could choose to lean into that, or you could choose to ignore that, or even shut it down, which there were a few times where that happened, where you're like, get out of here, get out of my office. Like, who are you? Like, you got to be kidding me. So I think it was really important, though, that the awareness, look, we did need to get cleaned up. There were people being taken advantage of, Has woke culture, or did woke culture go too far? I think it did. I mean, I could comfortably talk about this. I mean, I when I owned paper, we had a very diverse staff. Identity, was something that was very much acknowledged. We had people of all different gender identity, and I felt I was really supportive. And there was a particular time where somebody who didn't even work there anymore just kind of took it running me, saying, and weeks before, sent in a resignation letter saying how amazing we were. But an opportunistic situation came up, and I found myself on the other side of that. Luckily, I owned the company. Had I worked for a big publishing company, they probably would have fired me.
Right.
And I remember my kids were really devastated because they know the way we are at home, and what we value at home, and particular individuals, how proud I was of like their situation and working. And they were like, I cannot believe this happened. And, but even though that happened, I feel like, there's groups of people who've been abused for so long. It was because my son said to me, "This is so unfair, Dad." And I remember looking at him, and I said, "It is. But it's been so unfair for certain groups of people for so long."
Right. And somehow the balance has to be addressed.
Okay, I'm the target, but I'll live through it. I'm fine, like at the end of the day.
Well, your conscience is clean, and so you can live through it, because the people who know who you are don't care, and the people who care don't know who you are.
Yeah. So, I probably
think
way
balance,
over answered your question.
Right. Yes. And I think, and thank you for sharing that story, because that's, it's interesting to hear that perspective. I think the key is balance, because I think so often now, what we're finding is people who are quick to jump to accuse people, but there has to be the balance, and as a survivor myself, there has to be the balance of taking my own personal responsibility for my own experience as an adult. And I think that's where I feel like sometimes the balance has shifted too far the other way, whether you call it a woke thing, but I think it's so important that we live in a time and we give platform to people to speak their truth about their experience and to come forward if there's been some kind of transgression. But I think it's equally important and also empowering to people who might be victims or survivors to take responsibility for how they placed themselves possibly in a position to have that experience. And that doesn't mean assigning blame to them. It means empowering them with the possibility of having a different experience in the future by placing themselves differently, by the way they dress, the way they speak, the way they gesture, and just having acknowledgement of that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fundamental, which, ultimately how you are depends on how you are.
Right.
And not necessarily always external forces. I think it's really difficult, particularly for younger people today, because they're working remotely, they're not going into offices, they don't have the interpersonal communication and relationships in the workspace, and the dating is now done on apps. It's more about hookup culture initially than it is about going out and meeting somebody and talking with them and seeing if there's anything and that you can relate to, with algorithms putting people together. So there's kind of the death of intimacy, right?
100%.
And so what and what could be so exciting is intimacy. And intimacy isn't sexual. Intimacy is openness, interaction, decency,
playfulness,
gratefulness, friendship,
yeah.
But when when you're locked up in a little apartment, working 24/7 in a Zoom call, and then you could take a position on whatever and start to click away, and the anonymity of it is not only provides an opportunity for kind of destructive behavior, but also self-destruction.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to have not really grown up in a time where I was at the effect of that, where I really recognized the value of having true physical present interactions with people. I feel as though generations younger than me have a real struggle, even with eye contacts. I find them to be evasive and have difficulty maintaining engagement. And I feel like that's they're missing something, to speak to what you were talking about, this time where you're looking at your phone and you are being presented with a small screen, which is meant to be a representation of an entire person. And you get to choose in an instant whether or not that's somebody you want to engage with further. It just seems, it's upsetting to me.
Yeah, and it's posturing. It's like everybody's only presenting like this kind of part of them that they think will catch a fish.
Right.
As opposed to meeting someone and kind of falling in love with their quirks or whatever their thing is. But at the same time, being aware demographically of kind of where I fit in anyway. I don't want to sit here like I used to walk 20 miles to school in the snow. This is a way, this is a way where people are interacting now. And I do wonder where this kind of opportunity for real intimacy comes from, with the way things are moving. The more artificial the intelligence, the more porn, the more, it's just.
I mean, porn is a great example because, working in addiction, what I have become aware of so much is that porn feeds a particular part of your brain that activates addiction. So whatever you're looking at, you are then fed something that will cause the desire for a more extreme version of that. And that's how addiction works, right? And so porn is literally stealing your ability to create true intimacy. And yet we have so much access to it. People who are giving their kids cell phones at 9, 10 years old, or even younger. And I think I don't think any parent is like, oh, I want to give my kid access to this. I think most parents are just busy and they're like, I just need to just have this for an hour because I need to get something done. But when I see the true impact of that, when I'm looking at, people in their late teens, 20s, and early 30s who cannot sustain or even initiate meaningful, intimate relationships, it's scary.
Yeah. Or going into a restaurant, seeing two people sitting at a table and keep picking up their phones and they're on a date. Like that would be a very short date for me.
And yet, because of the internet, because of social media, I do feel as though from a mental health perspective, we have access to, and people have access to more help than they ever had before. When I think back to my time working in fashion and the tragedies that happened, the people who had so much success on one side, but had such an inner struggle, the people who ended up, either taking their own lives or dying of drugs or alcohol. Isabella Blow, who I used to live with. I used to live with her and Alexander McQueen.
Yeah,
and you just think this
tragic.
incredible, I wonder if they had been still around now, if that still would have happened, or if somebody would have kind of stepped in and gone, okay, we need to intervene here and
I don't know. You know more about mental wellness than I. I think there are two sides to the coin, maybe, but I also think that there's an opportunity through certain platforms for people, particularly people who are younger or maybe not necessarily younger, but more easily influenced or have a certain amount of depression, looking at all these lives that people are posting. And, I know a lot, like there's no way I would have posted any of the things
right.
that I did,
I mean,
I'm getting a private tour of the Sistine Chapel
Thank
and I'm going to be like,
God.
here I am with, here I am with Michelangelo.
But that's why you were allowed in the Sistine Chapel on a private tour.
You know what I'm saying?
Right?
It's just like, but there's so much of that. So you have people looking at all these supposedly, better lives than they have, which also causes, kind of a certain amount of anxiety, mental anxiety. So, I, if anything, it would seem to me that through the social platforms, there's an opportunity to have certain disorders become not necessarily adapted. They become trends.
Yeah.
They're, particularly with young girls in high school, who are at an age where their bodies are changing. They're happy with them. They're not happy. And then there are just certain trends that they're seeing all over a social platform that you wouldn't necessarily be seeing,
Right.
But this is where we are. And, I guess the question becomes, how do we inject responsibility, dignity, accountability? Like, where are the values? I mean, we're looking at, our I'm just going to say it, we're looking at our president,
Where are the values?
Where are the values? Well, what we get to see is you don't have to have any values. You can grab them by the pussy and you could get, you could not even have it be an issue, and then you could turn around and say, oh, by the way, we invaded your country, but you're the dictator. You know, and you started the war. So I think values, to me, in all this stuff is really going to be a challenge. Where are our values, and how far will the pendulum have to swing, and how dangerous will it get before we realize we've lost them? You know?
Well, I mean, they say that you change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing, right? So I think people have to experience the consequences. And I think consequences is something that is deferred for many people in this time. You know, we live in some kind of suspension of reality in so much and of our experience. And, you know, a lot of people I work with talk about being deserving and, oh, you don't deserve that. And what I always come back with is my experience is people don't really get what they deserve. You know, there are people who are at the top right now who didn't get there by being deserving. You get what you work for, you know? So I think the question is, what do you want to work for? And that's what you're, and then what is your value system around what you're willing to do to get it, right? So for you, with this incredible career, I mean, when you look back at who you were back then to who you are now, how do you think you've improved?
Well, we're assuming I improved.
Well, I've known you a long time, and I can see that you've
We're
improved.
assuming. I don't know if I've improved, but I've certainly evolved. I think a lot of kind of Tom had a substantial amount of ego. That was driving the bus on some level, and you know, I'm grateful that I was able to take that ego and kind of fear that drives ego and create something positive. You know, I was a hard worker. It was very important for me to have a certain, to live in a certain kind of socioeconomic strata, which I wasn't a part of, and I really worked hard, but I think that my awareness of where a lot of that motivation came from, even though, you know, I did get the great house and I had the great job and I had the wife and the children and private schools and house in the Hamptons and all that wonderful external stuff that told me I was doing okay. I think today I don't rely on external things to let me know I'm doing okay. I think that there's been, you know, a reasonable amount of reflection that's allowed me to kind of go in and clear up some of the drivers of that ego, which has kind of reset my nervous system and put me in a place where, you know, just kind of living purely in your authenticity is really a virtue. Where back then, I don't think I ever even contemplated the concept of living in your authenticity. It was really more about, you know, I needed a 5-pound September issue. You know, we had a $33 million September issue one year. You know, it was the biggest magazine ever published. It was like, those are the things that drove me. It was, you know, getting stuff. It was, it was very much kind of a, you know, looking at my value because I knew certain people and I got private tours of the Sistine Chapel, where I don't feel that way today. I don't, those aren't, while I'm really grateful for that whole world, those aren't the things that are defining me. I don't feel like I need those external things to define me. I'm super grateful to be able to live the way I live, you know, not, you know, just in terms of the things I do and the way I travel and the sports I play and, you know, my family's in a good place. So I guess gratitude is where we're ending up. and as opposed to ambition, which is where we started.
Right, right. And I suppose ambition is sort of going after something you don't have, and gratitude is appreciating what you do have now. And
At least for me, I don't think ambition for everybody might be that, you know, but you know, for me, I think it was there.
yeah. And so on your own personal journey, I know we were talking earlier about some of the things you've investigated to further your own personal journey. And, you know, I work a lot with people who make the decision to, whether it's take psychedelics or, you know, different kinds of journeys to help them. What's that been like from your perspective?
So you want me to talk about ayahuasca?
I want you to talk about ayahuasca.
So, you know, for me, coming out of the Condé Nast world was probably more difficult than I wanted to let myself believe, even though, you know, I had many very cool positions after that. You know, I was the CEO of Magic, which is the big fashion trade show, and bought paper and did all that. But I think I'd been actually in LA and met a bunch of people and ran into a woman that had just produced a documentary on ayahuasca, and she's a writer, my friend Colette Betty, and I was listening to her talk about it, and you know, just kind of put it away. You know, I had heard about it, and it sounded miserable, like some people threw up and all that stuff. I just kind of discounted it. And then, so, like about a year or so later, I was out with a young model, a young Russian model, my friend Anouska, that I met years before in San Francisco. And when she moved to New York, saw I bought paper, wanted to do some work for paper, asked me, you know, could I help her with her green card? And I have done this for people like my whole career, you know, helping people, particularly young people, and forgot about it. And then after COVID, I get this phone call, and she wanted to take me to lunch because she got her green card. And when I was sitting with her, I was looking at this woman, and the energy coming off of her was really unusual, not necessarily vibrant, but and a palatable energy. And I asked her, I said, what's happening? And she said, well, I've had a really difficult couple of years, and I've done this ayahuasca, and it's really had a particular impact on me. And I said, oh, I just was talking to somebody about this, but you know, I'm really scared to even, you know. And so she put me in touch with a shaman, and to learn more about it. And I think ultimately, which is probably, you can cut all that out that I just said and go to this answer. I think there came a time where I didn't know the difference between my story and my truth.
Wow.
I knew my story. I could Google me and see it. And I could see the pictures, and I could see pictures of me with Anna, and me with celebrities, and me with designers, and me at the Met Ball, and you know.
So that's like really an identity crisis.
It wasn't a crisis.
Really?
It wasn't an identity crisis. It didn't feel like that. I guess one might call it that, but it was really a curiosity.
Okay.
It was like, it was a question like, oh, is who we are on this earth based on our credentials? What we've done for a living? Is that who we are? And many people might just say yes, right? But then if you're no longer doing that, then who are you, right?
And that comes back to the value system, right? What are the values?
So that was why I mean, that was my kind of thinking about going and having this experience. And, it's not something I would recommend to people like, oh, you should go do this. Like and it's not like microdosing mushrooms. It's not like, it's none of the above. It is 30 years of therapy in like 3 days. And it really takes you to a place where all those things in your life that you created so you wouldn't feel pain get removed, and you go in on your pain.
Right.
And it's not the same for everyone. I mean, some people, don't have that, but I've done it multiple times. It like anything, the thing about the plant medicine, which is thousands of years old from the jungle, I actually think it's, just as a side, I think it's arrogant that we would be like, oh yeah, the FDA now could looked at this stuff and they actually say yes, it does help depression and post-traumatic stress, and we could recreate the molecule now, and you can go to a ketamine clinic and sniff some shit.
Right.
But this stuff's been going on forever, and I think that this expression that I was going to is like, you get what you could handle. So for people who kind of go on this spiritual journey, because it is, for some people, like as you kind of go into, like, you kind of start out light, you become aware of your ego. You're like, oh yeah, me and my father didn't get along. What, oh right, I should have been a nicer person. and then like as you get going, maybe you have to go to the bathroom once or twice. It's like, but like once you get into this and you really decide to do the work, it could get pretty gnarly. Yeah. You could have some very difficult evenings, but there's never been a time where you don't walk away better. Just.
I heard someone describe it as that it doesn't give you the answers, but it gives you the right questions and targets the areas that you really need to focus on, so that you can do the work after that. It isn't the work, it's sort of the launching in the right direction, or targeting.
Yeah, that sounds very clinical.
Okay.
This is not linear experience. This is not a linear experience. This is, and it could be many different things for many people. I mean, there are people who have, that I know, who have dealt with generational trauma where, they witnessed their great-grandparents being raped, or mother being raped, and then ultimately found out it was true, and the shame has been passed on, and by the way, I just want to say, because this is a public thing, it's like, this is not for everyone. If you are taking, if you are bipolar, this is not right. If you are on any kind of antidepressants, this is not right. It's very powerful for people who really want to do the work. And then what's also special about it is, once you develop a community, we have a pretty broad community of interesting people, from professors at Columbia, like you just interact in a different way without the ego filter, without all these other filters, and you just kind of reside in a different place together. So so yes, I did do that. And I think it's I'm really grateful to be kind of at my age in this place, kind of with a certain peace, if you will, or acceptance is better than peace. It's not peace, kind of a certain acceptance of things, which brings gratitude.
So
that was an interview no one would ever fucking expect to come out.
There you go. And that's why we're here.
This is not if you Google me.
No. But I mean, we don't want just the stuff you can Google. So from a career perspective, what's next for you?
I'm not sure. there, I was looking at, I mean, I was looking at kind of getting involved in acquiring this Division III soccer teams like Wrexham with somebody in Barcelona. I thought that was going to happen. That ended up not happening. I'm still on, boards. I'm on the board of Business of Fashion. I was not necessarily interested in going back into media, but given what I am seeing right now, and what's happening in the traditional media space, and then with just the complete kind of abomination of truth and rigor, I am thinking about maybe acquiring a particular media property, and really going down the middle, like shaking the left
Right.
and the
And
right.
Wow.
Like really coming up with and the point of view would really be to find the middle, which I believe most people reside in, but to really take on both sides of the extreme, both the MAGA and the extreme left side of it.
Well, I think most people reside there, and it has no representation in the
It
current
has no
space.
representation. And look, we can't just wake up every day and read like, oh, Trump's ruining the world.
Right.
Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, depending on who you are.
Right.
But there are some things that we need to offer, I believe, that will help a free, democratic society continue to move forward with appreciating differences, understanding people, not victimizing, not dividing. Basically everybody wants to just live together, make love, have a good meal, make sure your kids are okay, and live a pretty good life. We don't have to be like doing all this, like we're so manipulative. So anyway.
Well, I fully support.
But I don't
you
know.
doing
I mean,
that.
we'll see. Like I'm also fine with not. Like there are other things I'm doing that I'm really enjoying. So.
Well, I have watched you over the past at least 20 years as a young woman meeting you in New York, and now as a almost 48-year-old woman with a child, and I've watched the evolution of Tom Florio from my own personal experience and my own personal vantage point. And I have just loved watching you. I love how you care for your family. I love how you are thoughtful about your friends. I love how you are playful and lighthearted, and also deeply valued and have a sense of responsibility to yourself and to the people around you. And what you've done in the old value system of your career is astonishing. But what you've done on a personal level is truly impressive for me. And I'm so happy.
We have to spend more time together. That's amazing.
This is it. Here we go.
Well, thank you.
And I'm just so glad to know you. And I'm so glad that we get to spend these moments together, And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.